Hello, Shawnee Alliance. It's Pastor Chris. I don't have a whole lot in the way of updates, but to let you know, we are continuing to meet online only on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Check the website, shawneealliance.com. Click on COVID updates. It'll let you plug in. We've had some amazing online community. Please, please, please keep it up. I just love being able to interact with folks as we're able to online. Not a whole lot of updates, but just some reminders. We are continuing to collect masks for distribution throughout the healthcare world. These are cloth masks, but if you have N95, maybe you're doing some spring cleaning and you unpacked a box that you'd bought for woodworking. Well, bring them on in. If they're N95 and they're unopened, we can get them to the right hands. We are donating those as well. Continue to bring cleaning supplies. These cleaning supplies are not going to the hospitals. They're going to the healthcare workers for their use personally in their cars, in their homes, to keep them and their families safe. So again, those are things like Lysol and bleach and Pine Sol. I didn't know this. Apparently Pine Sol kills germs. I just thought it made floors look good. So whatever, Pine Sol, whatever those supplies are. We've even had some folks just bring in toilet paper, and I thought that was kind of neat. It's not really a cleaning supply, but people need it. So we're just blessing our medical community in their homes as well as in the hospitals. Finally, the notes of encouragement, keep them coming. We were celebrating getting into 7 different facilities, nursing homes, care facilities. Now we're celebrating we only have 7 left in our original run. Keep bringing those in. And a big shout out to Troop 777, the Boy Scout troop here at the church. I know they've been doing a great job. Lots of you have been doing an awesome job, but I got to see some pictures of our scouts in uniform having at it, and it just makes me so proud for the community involvement and, of course, the Christ likeness and just the ability to be the hands and feet of Jesus to some people who aren't getting visitation in the way that they're used to, who aren't getting to see the people and the love that they would appreciate so much in this time. So let's keep it going, Shawnee Alliance. Don't slow down. We're going to keep ministering despite our circumstances. All right, our devotional today. So Romans chapter 11, I'm a little bit behind because I keep listening or reading to 2 or 3 chapters a day, but my devotionals are lagging behind. So I read through this, or listened to it rather, if I'm honest. I listened to this several days ago, but it just struck me in this time how Romans 11 talks a little bit about how God's relationship with the Israelites and his people, and how that changed throughout time, and the opportunity that it created for the Gentiles, and God's glory throughout it all. So Romans chapter 11, starting at verse 11. Paul says, "Again I ask, did they," that's the Israelites, "stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. But if their transgression means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will their full inclusion bring?" So what Paul's saying here is that many in the Jewish circles, the Jewish community, did not accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah, and that this was part of what made the gospel so accessible for the Gentiles. Those are the people of non-Jewish heritage, and how that just made it so accessible for those who didn't have a history of worshiping Yahweh. So I think this is interesting because still Paul's heart is that, yeah, great things happen despite Israel's unfaithfulness, but look how much greater they will be if there's a full inclusion, if those whose Yahweh worship change to also include Jesus Christ as their Messiah. He goes on in verse 13, "I am talking to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles," which is true that Paul was really mostly active in Gentile communities, whereas the writers of the gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, for the most part, they were really writing to Jewish believers with some thoughts and some application. You know, Paul's writing to Rome, which is by no means a Jewish city. It's primarily a Gentile city, of course, engaged in emperor worship and worshiping the Greek/Roman gods. "Inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, I take pride in my ministry, in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people to envy and save some of them." In other words, that his ministry to the Gentiles has been flourishing, and his prayer is that those people who worship the God of the Old Testament would see this and become envious of it, and therefore start to give Jesus Christ a chance. Verse 15, "For if their rejection brought reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the part of the dough offered as the first fruits is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches. If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourselves to be superior to those branches. If you do consider this, you do not support the root, but the root supports you. I don't do a lot of gardening. I plant some like parsley because I like parsley and garlic and that kind of thing. That's about the extent of my gardening ability, and they usually die, but that's okay because they're herbs, you eat them anyway. So that's about my extent, but the idea here is that you are not the original plant, but you've been grafted on, and that you are getting your nourishment from the same God whose people were the Israelites. You are part of that tradition. You are part of that history. He goes on in verse 20, he goes on in verse 19. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. In other words, yes, you've made this decision to follow Christ in faith, but your faith is an ongoing, living thing. It's a breathing thing. And if you stop being faithful, the branch is split off. That God's splitting of that branch that created room for you, it was due to Israel's unfaithfulness. It wasn't because God turned his back on his people. It was because the people turned their back on God. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God, sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you will also be cut off. And if they do not if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted back in. For God is able to graft them in again. After all, if you were cut out of an olive tree that is wild by nature, and contrary to nature were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own vine? Listen, here's the application for today. We love to be able to say, look at what God's doing in the midst of this horrific situation. And that's one of the most powerful things about God, is that he does move in amazing ways during difficult times. And let's not stop acknowledging that. Let's not stop worshiping him for that. But let's also take a moment to acknowledge that the God of the universe, the God of you and I, that he can make horrible situations into good ones, but he also works very well through great situations. Our unfaithfulness, our disbelief may create a powerful testimony, but how much more powerful the testimony to our family and to our friends, for we who remain faithful in difficult times. This is a difficult time. Yes, God will use all the bad and all the negative to bring glory, because that's what God does. He takes the nasty and the rotten and that which was meant for evil, and he can turn it to good for those who love him. And he does that every day. That's part of becoming a transformed life. That God took what was bad in you and he made it for his glory. But please hear me, that persisting in faithfulness, keeping in touch with Jesus every day, making that effort to continue to be grafted. And I love this imagery that you were some wild olive tree that wasn't part of this cultivated, beautiful display. And God took you and he grafted you into what he had created beautifully. I love that. And of course, we pray for the return of those who fell away. We pray that we would all be grafted into this tree of life, this beautiful creation that God has made. But right now, what I want to focus on is simply this. Yeah, God's going to take amazing bad and turn it into amazing good. That's what God does. But there's also something beautiful in our persistence and our love for him and our choice to follow him daily. God's still there if we fail in that. But God's moving mightily and desires to move through us. This is Easter. This is the Easter season, right? We have it on our mind that what was meant for evil was turned into the most good moment in human history. We are part of that tradition. We have been grafted into a deep-rooted tradition of God moving in mighty ways throughout the world. And we get to be part of this. Let's not forget it, and let's not take it for granted. Let's celebrate it. God bless you, Shining Alliance. If you need anything, reach out to prayer@shiningalliance.com. I just appreciate you. Keep being the hands and feet of Jesus, and keep showing what it looks like when that wild olive branch is grafted into the beautiful cultivated tree that God's going to use to display his glory in Lima today. Have a great and a blessed day.